Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode 2 Introduction to Cloud and Azure. In this episode, I will talk about cloud benefits, introduction to Azure, Azure regions, pair region, and what is resource group. Now, any company who is saying I'm a cloud provider, yes, Google Cloud is there, Azure is there, AWS is there, IBM also have their own cloud. So any company or any provider who is saying I'm a cloud provider, yes, they can say, but they need to provide some basic characteristics, capabilities. So that capabilities includes pay as you go. Pay as you go means I'm not going to purchase any services or purchase the hardware. I'm going to use them, and whatever the number of hours and minutes I'm going to use, I will pay only for that particular service. And once I'm not subscribe any service, I'm not going to pay anything. So I pay only what I use. Next is per minute billing. So I subscribe a service for 1 month. I pay for a month billing. Normally it's a per minute billing. And if I stop and if I'm not using that service, I'm not going to pay them. If I use for 10 minutes, I'll just pay for 10 minutes. That's called per minute billing. Scale up, scale down. It's very difficult to increase the hardware, memory, RAM on-premises servers, but in cloud we have a single click option where you can scale up, scale down any services. Example, I have a virtual machine with 2 CPU and 2 gig RAM. I can increase 4 CPU and 4 gig RAM with a click. So increment, decrement, scale up, scale down services and cloud is very easy, and that's one of the biggest benefit of cloud. Next is no upfront cost. So no upfront cost means I'm not going to purchase any hardware cost. I'm just going to pay as per the usage cost per minute billing. And next is SLA, service level agreement. So they make sure the hardware or services should be up and running. So Microsoft will give you a specific service level agreement 99.9, 99.99% for every services, depend upon what type of services you can deploy. So that's called cloud and cloud benefits. Next is Azure. Azure is a public cloud. So there are three kinds of clouds we have. One is public cloud, one is private cloud, one is hybrid cloud. Public cloud means where anybody can subscribe the services. Let me explain you with one diagram, public cloud. So what Microsoft did in a particular location, they built your racks, servers, and everything. And anybody in a world, say ABC company, abc.com, once they have that subscription is like an identity, and they can subscribe any services. So it's a public cloud. The meaning is another company called xyz.com also have a subscription, and they can also subscribe and build up servers. So it's a public cloud. So whenever I deploy a virtual machine, it's actually running on one of the servers on the backend data center location, say East US, and I'm going to pay whatever the number of hours I'm going to run this server. So I'm not going to purchase the hardware, I'm going to use the services and pay the usage cost. That's called the Azure. So in Azure, we have a concept called regions. So what Microsoft did, every continent, they given a region called location, say East US. So East US is my region. So if I am having a subscription and I can deploy a VM into the East US. So East US is one of the region location. As a best practice, we should deploy a service wherever the customer location exists, so or very close to the location. So if a customer is in US, we need to make sure the data center has to be very closest, means East US only. That's always be a best practice. In a particular region, we have three data centers normally in every region. So we called as zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. So whenever you deploy something in Azure, by default it goes to the zone 1 until unless you deploy something with high availability, means more than one zone. Suppose you selected something should be deployed zone 1 and zone 2, then one virtual machine should be in a zone 1 and one virtual machine should be in a zone 2, so that if zone 1 get crash, at least the VM should be up and running on zone 2, and we have some distance between zone 1 and zone 2. So by default, it has to be in zone 1 until unless you specify some high availability options. We will talk about those high availability options, but just for your reference, that is called availability set, availability zone. We'll talk about these two features in upcoming episodes. So that's called zones and regions, data center. And so this entire is your region, and these are the zones. Next point is pair region. So what is pair region? I deploy something in East US. Say example storage. And when I choose storage, geo replication storage, example, it create three copies into the East US, and by default, it create three copies in the West US. So what is pair region? When you deploy any specific services in a primary region, and by default, the replica automatically goes to somewhere else outside to the region where admin is not going to choose West US. It always goes to the West US. So replica can go to the Europe also, but it's not going to the Europe. Why it's going to the East US or to the West US? Because if something you deploy here and replica by default goes outside to the region, it always goes to the predefined region. And that predefined region we called as pair region. So when I go to google.com and type Azure regions, so as I said, Azure region is the location. So you choose which location you want in Europe. In Europe, we have East US, East Europe, West Europe. Finland, we have coming soon. France. So every part of the world corner, we have a region. In US, most of the time we are working on East US, which is first time launch in 2012. So that's called region. And when I say a pair region, so pair region means, as I told you, any replica goes outside to the East US, always goes to the West US. So now East US is always be paired with the West US. So that's called pair region. Now, next is resource group. So I'll open one diagram, OneDrive, Azure Training, diagrams, and resource group. So resource group is a container. Without this one container, you cannot deploy anything in Azure. So you see, this is called my root. This is my container. So the question comes, why we need multiple containers? So the resource group is like a folder where you can deploy your resources. So if you need to bifurcate your deployment, say example, customer one specifically non-prod, customer one prod, customer two non-prod, customer two non-prod. So I need to bifurcate the deployment between customer one and two, and that to be non-prod and prod, I created multiple resource group like a folder. So tomorrow you want to deploy a very specific project, you can create a separate resource group for that project. So the resource group can contain a specific type of resource or can be bifurcated based on prod and non-prod. And another reason to have a specific resource group is the RBAC permissions. So there's an example you want to deploy some specific services in Azure, and you want this permission has to be given to a specific person called John. In that case, you have a very separate uh, role-based permission into this resource group. I will cover resource group role-based permission in a separate recording. So as of now, resource group is a container where we deploy some services or services. And the reason to have resource group is to bifurcate the deployment based on non-prod and prod, maybe customer one and two, or any other specific reason, depend upon the permission requirement. So that's called the resource group. So thank you everyone for watching this episode 2. And next we'll start with Azure Virtual Network in depth. Thank you very much.